What's up, everybody? We are excited to welcome you to one
Back at the table.
table.
Back at the table.
It's a nice little table. It's a nice little table.
Nice little table, right?
Nice little table.
We
here.
yeah. If you haven't noticed, we have a special guest
Exclusive.
at the table,
At the
Miss
table.
Kimtrese Slaughter,
The one and only.
the one and only, our friend, and also the
Sound effects.
owner and like CEO and head therapist. I don't know what all your titles are, but from Hummingbird Counseling. And she gonna come and kind of help us have this conversation around counseling, around therapy,
Yeah.
and how Christians should think about therapy, how Christians should think about counseling, because we know it's somewhat of a hot topic.
Yeah.
We got the hashtag Jesus in therapy, therapy and Jesus. I've been seeing it on T-shirts.
I'm not on Twitter enough, apparently.
And so we wanted to talk about it here. So, I want to just start off with the table. Maybe start with us, because you're the professional.
Right.
We'll kind of say
She's been doing this
what
for a
our
while.
experience, what our thoughts are of counseling first, and we'll come to you with this first question. But my question to y'all is, what is your impression of counseling, of therapy? When you hear it, how do you fill the blank in your mind? What do you think of? What do you see? And do you generally have like a positive or a negative, impression when you think of counseling or therapy?
I'll go first because I'm pretty sure my thoughts are probably what the most common people's thoughts are.
Okay.
All right. So, and this is going to be really weird because my mom was a guidance counselor in the school system for 10 years. So this is going to be really weird. But to me, initially, counseling meant something was wrong with you and you need somebody to talk to. Like it's something going, you go to counseling when something is wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Like some traumatic experience has happened and you need to talk to somebody in confidence that you can just spill all the beans to, and that's it. It hasn't been until recently, probably the last 2 or 3 years, when it's like, no, you go to counseling, it's a good thing to go just because you don't have to wait till something's wrong with you before you go.
Yeah.
And of course, counseling, I don't think I ever looked at it as a bad thing per se. I mean, because, the Bible tells you to seek wise counsel. I mean, you do that anyway, but like professional help, it's almost like, dang, you need professional help.
Right. Like you don't just need help.
You need next level.
Yeah, you need professional help. It's something like, dang, something really must have happened.
Yeah.
And I've never been
That's good.
I've never been, being in church my whole life, being a pastor's son, like I've never had the thing like, oh, you don't need counseling, just pray and it'll, go away. Like I've never was that extreme.
Right.
But I never thought that it was like, I never thought that you could just go to counseling, go to therapy for good things. I always thought something had to be wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I'm like kind of in the percentile of most Americans probably think that. But I don't think that anymore. Thank God. But yeah. And I actually need to go to it. Probably get me a thing. No, for real. Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, because life has changed.
Yeah.
For me, you know what I'm saying? I'm married, got kids. Things have changed in the last 5, 7 years. So, like where I was 10 years ago, I probably would have been like, man, I don't need no counseling. Ain't nothing wrong with me.
Right.
But now it's like, life done hit you a little bit.
Yeah.
It's time to talk about some stuff. So, yeah.
I guess for
What about
me,
you?
it wasn't like positive, it wasn't negative. It was just kind of, I don't know, apathetic. Like it's just over there.
Yeah.
Usually when I would think of therapy, you would think of like the movies where it's a leather couch. You're always horizontal, right? You're laying down on your back. The therapist is like behind you, like hiding, and it's used in movies for like flashbacks. That's therapy, right? Like it wasn't like I just had the mythological, what you see on the screen, and very little experience with it. And you might hear, like my parents never did it, but you hear my friends' family be like, "Hey, you keep acting up, we're gonna send you to counseling."
Right.
Or like it was like a threat. Yeah. I guess for a while it was kind of it's just over there if you need it, right? Break glass in case of emergency. And I'm sure we'll get into like our experiences with it. But I remember when Steph was first like, you should go to see a therapist. I was like, the whole reason I'm stressed is I've got 100,000 things on my plate in my schedule. Why would I add something?
Yeah.
Like that was just my response.
Yeah.
Probably word for word, right? I'm stressed because I got so much going on. Why would I add something else to my calendar? And then
And to the other thing too, guidance counselors in Virginia happened when I was like in middle school. And you went to the counselor when something was wrong.
Yeah.
Like you never, it was never presented like you go to a counselor for something good.
Yeah.
Like if anybody was like, I need to go see the counselor, he was like, oh, what did happen to them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it was, I was 10, 11 years old. So from that early age, it was just indoctrinated into me. Something's wrong with you. That's when you say counselor.
Yeah.
It wasn't looked at as a positive thing. So I think that's something we might be able to get into as well when we start talking about, COVID and education system, stuff like that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm kind of more on the lines of you, Chris. I think I've always thought that counseling was for when something bad happens, something traumatic happens. And even in like more recently, as kind of culturally, the stigma of counseling has kind of been fading away. The negative stigma around counseling has kind of been fading away. I still have that feeling of, like for me, I know people always say, you should you should go to the doctor, like just the regular doctor, right? Like family practitioner, just to, for checkups. And I feel weird and awkward even doing that, right? Like asking, for a physical or for a checkup when I feel fine. I feel like I'm wasting everybody's time, and money. And so I've always felt like, I mean, this is a little bit of a confession, and this is me trying to get past this. So maybe Kimtrese could help me, but I always, I don't know. I have that block of like, nothing's wrong with me. And I feel like nothing's wrong with me. And I feel like if I, sign up for counseling, I'm going to be wasting everybody's time, my time, their time. But it's crazy though. As a pastor though, I talk to people all the time, and I recommend counseling, and I say like, it's good. And even if you're healthy, you should go. But personally, I've never gone. And so that's something, confession, that I know I need to do. So maybe this conversation will help with that.
It seems like some conditioning there, but
Yeah, no, but I'm trying to uncondition. Like I recognize and appreciate, like, yeah, it's that's the stigma, that has been around me. And I realize like counseling is not just for, that's the question, right? Like, who is counseling for? And I think I've always thought, like Chris said, counseling is for mentally unhealthy people, instead of thinking about counseling as is for people who want to be healthy, right? Just like going to the doctor, you do that because you want to stay healthy. So, I don't know. What about you? What's your experience with counseling before you became a therapist, a counselor? What did you think of it?
I didn't think anything of it. Like I grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
I'm the oldest of 10. And
10.
a lot of us. And we grew up in this really volatile and abusive environment. And we never talked about God. We never talked about counseling. There's just certain things we just never talked about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I maybe was 10 or 11, my mother, both my parents were drug addicts. And so we went to foster care when I was like a couple of days before my 10th birthday. And I was having really bad anxiety attacks. I would pull out my hair, would bang my head against the wall. And so I was with a foster mother, and I was only with her for a couple of weeks. And they told her that she had to take me to counseling because she was like, I can't keep her because she gonna kill herself. And so they took me. This is my first encounter with counseling as I was 10 years old. And she kept saying, we're going to the doctor. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Right.
I knew what the doctor was. I knew what that was.
Right.
So I didn't ask any questions. But when we got there, it didn't look like a doctor's office. So I was like, this is not a doctor's office.
Right.
And she was like, no, it is a doctor's office. And I kept asking her, and she just wouldn't. So my little inquisitive self, when she goes to the restroom, my foster mom, I go up to the desk, and I asked the receptionist, what type of doctor is this? And she was like, oh, it's a doctor where you could tell all your problems. And she will help you. And I was like, what? Because at that time, it was 10 of us. Right. And not only was it 10 of us, we lived with my aunt and my grandma. So it was like 18 of us in like a 2-bedroom apartment. So you weren't getting no attention. So if you had a problem, you better solve it on your own.
Yourself.
And so I'm like, somebody that I can actually share my problems with and they could help me. Oh, I was ready. I was ready. So
that's cool.
When I went in though, I just started talking. I was ready. And she had asked me no question. And she was like, hold on.
Right.
And so she was saying, she barely looked at me. And she was just like, yeah, so I said, you have some anxiety. I said, why are you pulling out your hair? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I'm ready to answer your question. I'm ready to tell you why. But she just never really allowed me to do the thing that this receptionist said she was going to do. And she said, well, you're a little black girl. living in the projects, and you live kind of like in a bad neighborhood, and so yeah, you probably gonna experience some anxiety. And I was like, what? This is not what she said. And I just got up and walked out.
Yeah,
I was done. I was in there probably 10 minutes, and my foster mother was like, what happened? And I walked out and I went up to the reception. I was like, you're a liar.
Dang.
But I wanted to cry. I was like so overwhelmed with emotion, and I was like, I'm not crying. I'm not gonna let anybody see me cry.
Wow.
And when I got back to my foster mother's house, I went to the bathroom and closed the door, and I was just bawling because it was not what I was told. So again, it was like, okay, solve your own problems. You don't need people. Just do your own thing. So that was so from then I was like, But you know what? A little bit after that, I was just like, it's a great idea. I'm a 10. I'm 10. It's a great idea. If she would have done what she was supposed to do, that's a great idea. Right. And so I said to myself, I'm going to do that. Oh, wow. But I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it the way that the receptionist said it was supposed to have been done.
Oh, that's dope.
Wow.
So from there, I was like, okay, I'm reading books. I'm a book reader, so I'm reading books and I'm learning. When I started realizing the education, though, I was like, hold up. Like, tell me about this. Yeah. But yeah, but from then, I never really looked at therapy as negative. I only in that instance. But after that, I never looked at it as negative.
That's so crazy. Yeah. So I want to hear how that transition went in a second, but into you actually becoming a counselor yourself. But I think that's also a block for me. And so I've never been. I don't know if you've been, Chris, and you just said that at least your wife told you should.
Yeah, I went. Yeah, I went.
So I think that's always the block for me. And I'm speaking for all the people who are like me out there. I got y'all. I'll be honest and confess and ask all the questions for you. But I know for me, like part of it is like, am I wasting people's time? Blah, blah. I said that before. I'm not unhealthy. But I know for me, a block has always been like, what is that first session going to be like? And so it's interesting to hear you say you just opened up and you just were talking from jump. And so, like, I don't know, for you, did you have that fear before you went of, like, what is it going to be like? And did you have a positive or a negative experience?
Right. I guess that's the advice I give people is sometimes the first one ain't the one.
Okay, yeah.
Because, I went to a guy a couple of times, and it was, like, just not happening for whatever reason. I couldn't put my finger on it, but then I tried another person, and it was amazing. So, yeah.
Okay.
That was my experience. Like, I just tell people, like, if the first therapist, then you don't hit it off. Don't give up on therapy. Like,
move on to another counselor.
Yeah, keep trying.
That's good. All right. So then how did you make this transition? We got some like topical questions as always. We like to pull on current events and what's in the news and stuff like that and how that connects to counseling. But maybe, Kimtrese, you could talk a little bit about how you became a counselor, because that's interesting, that shift from that negative experience to becoming who you are today, and then talk a little bit about your actual practice and give yourself a little plug.
I ain't got no problem with that. Right. So like I said, from that moment, it was really trying to understand, because I only had that little snippet of what was supposed to happen. So really trying to understand what therapy was really like. And living in the community I lived in, nobody went to therapy. So there was no one I could go to and say, hey, have you ever been to therapy? Or have you ever talked to a therapist? There's no therapist in my neighborhood. So I had to go to books. I had to go to books. I had to really, I would read a lot of Irvin Yalom books to try to understand what therapy was. And I loved his book, The Gift of Therapy, because he actually walked you through specific sessions and how things went and how to interact with the client. And to speak to what you said about the connection, therapy is about connection. That's the thing. You didn't have a connection with him. That's why it fell off. When you say you couldn't put your finger on it, therapy is all about the relationship. If we have a good relationship, if you trust me to guide you and to lead you, then not to tell you what to do, but to guide you and to lead you, then we're gonna hit it off well. And so just started learning about what it took to become a therapist as far as schooling, which was a whole lot. I was like, well, I might as well become a doctor then.
Right.
Shoot.
Right.
So, you have to go to school, you go to get your bachelor's, get your master's. Then you have to do 2 years of clinicals. And then after that, you got to sit for, after you get your master's, then you have to take a test, a big test, 4-hour test. Then you go to your 2 years of clinicals. Then you sit for the national exam. and the stress, and so you have to get 4,000 hours of clinical hours.
Jeez.
4,000 hours of clinical hours.
So, okay, so before you go on, I want our listeners and even those watching to understand how you just went through all of the things that you had to do to be able to be in the seat that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
For people who have never been to counseling like me, hopefully something like that will reassure them, like, hey, the people that are doing this are well educated and they've taken a lot of time of their own personal life to gain knowledge in this subject area. So when you go to therapy, you're not just going to somebody who's like, oh yeah, I want to be a therapist. No, they actually have to put in work. Like you're talking about hours of testing and stuff. So it's not, it ain't no, you just woke up one day and became a therapist that owns a whole company. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it was a lot to that. So go ahead.
And then still, even as a therapist, you still have to get CEUs every year. We're taking big trainings. I just finished taking EMDR. I just finished taking brain spotting, which is body therapy, energy therapy, and brain therapy. Like sitting in classes, learning about the functioning of the brain. I love that stuff. But some people, they sit in class like, what?
Right,
the
right.
amygdala, the hippocampus, thalamus, the what? And I'm like, yes, and so it's ongoing. It's not like you do all of that and then you stop. No, it's ongoing because people change, right? We're complex people, so we change. And sometimes talk therapy doesn't work. If somebody has experienced like really deep trauma, they need somebody to tap into those brain spots to release that trauma out of the brain, or to the body to release the trauma, because the brain holds trauma and the body holds trauma, right? If I work the trauma out of the body, you still got trauma in the brain, right? And so we're always learning. And so initially I wanted to do marriage and family. I thought I wanted to do marriage and family. And I did it for a while and I liked it. But I started to see that in a lot of marriages, the women were just struggling. And not struggling because of the marriage per se, but struggling with their own identity, with trying to find out who they were. It's so crazy how we can get married and not even know who we are. We can have children and not even know who we are. And then we get in there and then we struggle because we interact in marriage how society tells us to.
Ooh, yeah. You can't afford not to know who you are in marriage and having kids.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
And so that's where it led me to doing women.
Yeah.
I wanted to specifically focus on helping women to get where they are, because you have women who have daughters and even have sons. You don't know who you are. You're training your children. They're looking at you. And I think women, not because I am a woman, but I am, I think we're so powerful. I think we lend so much. If we look at history, how women have the power to build or tear down kingdoms, but we don't know our own power. We don't know our own power. And so I wanted to open up a counseling agency that was specifically for women to go and just spill it all, right? And not in the sense of spilling tea, but in the sense of I have to be powerful out there, but I have somewhere I can be weak. I have somewhere where I can feel safe. I have somewhere I can go and tell myself, and I'm not going to be judged. Because the world expects women to be, do this, and always going, oh, you're a strong black woman, or you're a strong. Sometimes I don't want to be strong. Sometimes I don't feel strong. Sometimes I want to lay, like I have doctors and engineers and lawyers that I work with. They come and lay on the floor and just for 45 minutes. And I'll be like, yes, girl, I'm with you. I'm going to get down with it, but you're going to have to help me get back up because my knees ain't right. But awesome. Just being with them. And a lot of them for the first time saying, this is the first time someone was actually with me.
Wow. That's
empathy,
good.
Sitting with me in my pain. So I wanted to build something like that for women.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, what went through my head, Chris, when you mentioned that and just hearing all that you just said about how you stay up on your game is it puts a positive spin on that phrase, professional help. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you need professional help. It's always like you need somebody to take care of you because that's how bad you are. But I think what's cool is that hearing like no professional help, it means that, man, they up on their game and they really are, or at least we can recommend you. I don't know. I can't recommend everybody, but you're up on your game and you're a professional. So
before we get into that, I know it's probably maybe a question I have. We heard so much about the science and the professionalism and the studies, the academics of counseling. But from a Christian perspective, I guess my question is, why is it such a stigma in the church
Right.
When you talk about
because some people
therapy.
be like, I don't want professional help. I want spiritual help.
Yeah,
You know?
like why do so
It's
many
true.
Christians have an issue with therapy? And I guess, is your practice Christian based, and if it's not, how does that matter or not matter? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to hopefully understand what I'm
That's
asking.
a great
question.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the church feels that way because we fear what we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I always say, if you fear something, then the antidote to that is competence. You know, just try to understand what it really is. It's not something that goes against God, right? God created everything, right? Including science. And so it's not something that goes against God. And also in the church, it's so easy to look at someone with a broken arm and say, oh man, we're with you, we're praying, because I can see,
Right, I can see it.
I can see it. But if I have depression, you think it's easy to get over it. And so how come if I have a broken arm, or let's just say if I have cancer, it's okay, and we don't equate that with a lack of faith or a lack of praying or a lack of relationship with God.
That's good.
But if it's my brain,
Right.
then
Pray it
you
away.
just got to pray more.
Yeah.
You just got to spend more time with God.
Yeah.
And I have women that come to me. I see a lot of pastors' wives.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they're like, I've been praying for 20 years and I'm still depressed.
Right,
And I'm
right.
like, prayer is great, but there's some other work that you need to
So
do.
good.
Like, that's just like if you say I got cancer and I've been praying for the last 5 years and I'm still declining. Because you need to go see a professional that's trained in treating the type of cancer that you have.
Yeah.
Right.
And God has blessed them with that gift to do so.
Yeah,
And so you need to take advantage of that.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with your lack of faith in God. You're going because you do have faith in God, and you know that doctor or that therapist really can't heal you, but they're a vessel that God is using to heal you.
Yeah, and we oftentimes reading the scripture, you know, faith without works is dead. So faith in the prayer is good, but we forget about, when it comes to therapy in the church, we forget about the works part of that.
Yeah.
Faith without the works.
And we also forget
And
the part
the
about work
therapy
out your
is the
own
works.
salvation.
Yeah.
Work out, action, do.
You gotta
Preach,
do
Kimtrese.
something. Yeah, you gotta do
Come
something.
on now.
Right.
Like there are times, just like Jesus, and then I'm gonna let you have it.
No, it's
you know,
good.
just like Jesus spent his time on the earth, when he would do miracles, after he performed miracles, he would go back and pray and get instruction from the will of the Father, and then he would get up and go do.
Yeah.
He didn't just pray in the garden all day long. He actually did some work.
Yeah.
So if Jesus did that, why can't we do that? I'm saying not just put it all on spiritual and just pray and do no work. You know, I think we got to do a better job. And Kimtrese and what she does is helping the church do a better job with, hey, you can have God and you can have therapy too. Like they can work together because God created it.
Exactly.
So if he created it, then we know it's
good.
Right.
And it's good for us.
Right.
So let's take advantage of it.
I feel like we've talked about that with other stuff like critical race theory, Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter. Like you don't have to just you're either with it or against it. Like no, there's test everything, hold on to the good. There's common grace where God can use doctors, therapists, all kinds of stuff. But I remember in college taking philosophy, all these different classes, like Freud called religion like the universal opiate of the masses.
We're always talking about some opiates.
Yeah, something like that. The neurosis of humanity. And you're like, like it always seems like they wanted to keep religion at arm's length, and they're like, we talked about religion wants to keep that at arm's length because we don't know about all that.
Right.
And like, how do you integrate the two? But it's funny you talk about the brain, you talk about family, because my wife has a brain malformation, my son has a brain malformation, and not only that, but he was in an orphanage for years where like connections in his brain are happening. So my response to that isn't, I should just pray about it.
Right.
It's like, no, there are therapies that he should engage in, like doctors he should see, and I know you talked about the brain, like the eye-opening book that they recommended during the adoption process was it Body Keeps the Score?
Oh,
it talks about like the neuroplasticity of the brain. Once I started learning about all that, it was like, maybe I should get up in some therapy.
Excellent book.
No, that's good. I mean, okay, I heard you talk about Body Keeps the Score and how it's like 400 pages or something crazy.
But it's 400 of good pages.
So there's another book. There's another book that I read that, I mean, I'm not trying to, you should read that book probably. But there's another one. It's like literally this thin, probably 100 pages that I read a while back called Christians Get Depressed Too.
Yes, that's a good one too.
That really helped me a lot as just a pastor dealing with people, you know, who were really dealing with depression and trying to figure out what is this stigma, like Chris, you asked, in Christianity and therapy. And It talked about how there are multiple layers of trauma and there are multiple ways that depression affects us. And so sometimes it is spiritual. Sometimes it is physical, though, right? Like sometimes it's an actual chemical thing happening in your brain or your body. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's a combination of all those. Actually, it was saying it's really usually a combination of all those things. And so, can you pray for someone and they be healed? And can Jesus heal you from physical, emotional, spiritual ills? Absolutely. But we know that he also, like y'all been saying, uses other people and has gifted other people, professionals, to be able to help in ways that are material, emotional, right? And so, anyway, so that's that on that.
Some of the lepers were healed as they went.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, they were healed as they went. Perhaps they got healed in therapy. I mean, using my dad would say, my sanctified imagination. They were healed as they went. They
took action, right? Take up your mat and go. Yeah, it's about doing, going, right? Yeah. And he's gifted us to serve. Right? Yeah, it's a type of service that we do to help others. Like Jesus said, I have not come to be served. I've come to serve. And I think when we talk about purpose, I think we all have the same purpose in that aspect of service. We're the body. We're here to serve each other. Right. And so that's what we do. We're here to serve. And I wouldn't say that my organization is a Christian organization. I am a Christian. And so anybody can come. I see any and everybody. And that's I love any and everybody. And I pray for any and everybody.
As we should.
And some people will prefer to talk about God throughout. Some people will say, I've had people come and say, well, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in the Bible. Oh, okay. Now it's in me. So I can't help it. It's going to come out. Right. All right. I ain't trying to convert you. Right. But it's going to come out. Right. But I've had it come out and I'm not going to apologize. Right. Because you already know who I am. Yeah. But I've had women be like, hey, you said a scripture last week and I read it. And I'm like, oh, but the atheist. Oh, okay. All right, let's talk about it. That's awesome. So it's gonna whatever's in you is gonna leak out, and I don't apologize for that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think since we do have a professional in the room, we can kind of get into some topics, and I guess the first thing for all of us, I feel like one of the reasons why therapy, counseling has been coming up so often is because we've all been through a rough year and a half with COVID. And so a lot more people are thinking about therapy. A lot more people are, I've heard that there's a counseling boom. And so I want to know about that. I guess more specifically is, what are some indicators maybe for people like me, for people like Chris who have never been to counseling before, having gone through COVID, this pandemic, that maybe we might need to seek out some help, and what are some ways that we can do that? What do you think?
So I think one of the things that we have to do is pay attention to our bodies, because it's always going to show up in our bodies first. It'll show up in the form of like brain fog. You'll be like, oh, lately I just been forgetting stuff. I can't remember nothing. Or somatic in the body. I just got a random stomach ache or headache. I was not having these headaches before. Wow. So I just have these random body aches. Yeah. Also listening to what other people are saying to you. Like, I mean, you've been a little irritable lately. You've been a little snappy lately. And it's the small things that if not cared for will turn into larger things, something bigger. And so I think it really starts with those little things. And I think everyone should go to therapy just because we've all been through COVID. It has affected us in some type of way. And just because you can identify how it has affected you, that's why we're the professionals, because we can see stuff that you can't see. If you're thinking about my business, right, Hummingbird, the reason I chose that specific name, because I'm trying to figure out what story I want to tell y'all. So when I was little, right, and I was in foster care, I dealt with a lot of abuse in foster care. In this one particular home that I was in, my foster father was a pedophile. He would lock me in a closet. And under the closet, it was just, I could see the light, right? So I was in my room, but I could see the light, like whether it was day or night, because he would lock me in there all day. Wow. And I could hear the birds. I could hear the birds. And then when he would allow me out, he would just lock me in the room. And then I would sit by my window. And in New York, they have all those low power lines. and you either see birds or sneakers up there.
Yes.
You're like, dang, those some Jordans. I need to get up there and get those.
Right.
And so, and I would see the birds, and I would just be like, man, they're so free. They get to come and go as they want. They don't have no suitcases. They're being taken care of somehow, right? And so I started like really reading about birds, and hummingbirds are one of the smallest birds, but they're also the only birds that can fly up, down, left, right, up, down, backward and forward. And when I think about that motion, I think about perspective. Like you could come into counseling with one perspective on your depression or your anxiety or your stress. And if I say to you, let's just move left. What do we see now? Let's move right. What do we see now? Yeah. So as a professional, it's about us giving you perspective and saying, have you considered this? And most people will say, no, I have not considered that. Right. And so paying attention to those really small things, knowing that you're off, and that requires you to spend time with yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
And knowing what's off and saying, something's off. And some people will come to therapy and be like, I don't really know what's wrong, but something's not right. And I'm going to ask all the right questions to pull it out of you.
That's awesome. I feel like that's something that people need to hear. Two things you said. The first thing was everybody needs to go to therapy because of what we all been through with COVID. Like it has affected all of us, which I think some people might need to receive that permission to just be like, it might not have affected you the same way it affected your coworker who, his mom died because of COVID or whatever it is. And so, but it has affected you too in some way. And so that's awesome.
And I would say the major way that we all have been affected was our lack of connection. God created us to connect.
Yeah.
And we need connection like we need to breathe and like we need to sleep.
Wow. Yeah.
And so because we have not been allowed to connect, and Zoom is cool, but we're energy people, right? And like, have you ever been in a room and somebody come in and you be like,
they off.
You don't know them. Nobody never told you anything negative about them. You just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or somebody come in the room, and you feel like you knew them for all your life. Right. It's the energy. And so we're created for that energy. And COVID did not allow us to have access to that. Which affected us.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of the prisons are now trying to do away with solitary confinement because people are literally losing their mind and creating things in their brain. Their brain is creating connection because it craves it that bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. So in thinking, okay, so we all need to go to therapy.
Yeah, man. Like, that was my story's backwards because COVID is the reason I haven't been going. Right?
Okay.
The therapist I was seeing for so long, she had a child, right? So she stepped aside for 9 months, and then COVID happened. And so, like, it's funny because, like Chris said, I'm about to start making some calls. This conversation. I called somewhere on Monday. I was like, I really need to start going back. But for me, it's like this is like me, my well-being, my family's well-being. My car, I take in for like regular maintenance, not because it's like
something's wrong with it.
I can't drive it. So like the more I went, the more I'm like, man, this is so healthy because like I don't need to wait till my whole life is in shambles. Like Steph and I did couples counseling with this therapist, not because our marriage was about to rest, but because maybe we should do a checkup, right? A checkup, like if you would have a physical checkup. But I'm sure we'll talk about it. Like we elevate physical pain over mental pain.
The oil change, tire rotation. We need all that.
Right.
It's important.
That's good.
You do that to keep it working at its optimal.
And see, now I know why I've never been to therapy because I am that person who needs my inspection sticker to expire
Exactly.
so that I can go get a checkup because I'm just not gonna do it.
Like, David, why your car shaking?
I'll be the one like, is it? I didn't even notice.
I thought that was the music.
So I need people in my life, and I love that you said, when people look at you and like, you all right? Like you've been this or you've been that. Sometimes, I know I need that. Other people to look, at me and give me feedback. So
probably not a coincidence. My wife was the one like, hey, you should go see a therapist.
But okay, so we all need therapy. Is there anybody, who you would say we as people, even just, okay, so as Christians, right? Like we're not all therapists per se, but I love how you said we are made to serve people. We're made to serve people. And so what can we do? First question is, are there certain people maybe in our congregations, in our communities, and even in our families who we know that are have been most affected that you think we should be looking out for? Like in my mind, I think about teachers and students because they are the ones who've been on Zoom, 8 hours every day or whatever it is. So who should we be looking out for? And then what should we do? How can we, if we want to serve our brothers and sisters who have been especially triggered by COVID, like what can we do?
I think you first have to look at changes in the patterns of their behavior. So if someone is like outgoing, hey, David, and now they're just a little bit more reserved, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more inactive, maybe they served before and now they're just like coming to church.
Wow, that's so
maybe
good.
coming late, maybe skipping weeks, like.
And can I just stop you right there? That is so important for pastors to hear.
Yes.
Because now that things are getting back into the swing of things and we all want everything to go back to normal and we need volunteers and we need, it's important for us to hear people still ain't right all the way.
No, they're not. And people are
That's
still
so
afraid.
good. Yeah.
People are still afraid.
Yeah.
And so just paying attention to people, their behaviors and what's different. Something's, I haven't seen such and such in a while. Let me just call and check on her. And she may be like, I'm not good. I'm not. And giving people permission to say, I'm not okay. Like not judging them, criticizing them. And, people, when you say, hey, how you doing? Everybody like, oh, I'm good.
Right. That's just church culture.
Right. If I'm not good and somebody say, hey, Kimtrese, how you doing? I'm tired. I think I'm burnt out. I don't know. Just giving people permission to be honest. And the way that we do that is we are honest.
Yeah.
We're able to be honest with people. That gives them permission to be honest with themselves about how they're doing.
Wow. That's so good. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Any thoughts on that, y'all?
Just thinking.
No, I mean, just the whole idea of it being okay to not be okay. I know it's a trap that talk about church, like pastors fall into. Is like, you got to keep this facade of like, I'm good. I got it all together.
Yeah.
When really, like, I think it was Irvin McManus who said, like, integrity isn't being without fault, being without false. Like, it's not like my life is all hunky-dory and perfect. We go through a mess. But, like, I have hope. I can point to that hope in the midst of that mess. Yeah. And also, I'm sure we'll talk about self-care. That goes out the window, too, so fast for pastors and in ministry. But it's not just pastors. So
yeah.
And I think we have to... I think, especially as pastors, I talk to a lot of pastors about this because I think they think that's what they're supposed to do. Right. That's the societal norm. That's the societal expectation. You're the pastor. You're the leader. You gotta look the part. You gotta walk the part. You gotta move the part. But the Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you're not loving yourself first, then what do you have to give to your neighbor? And I think some pastors feel so trapped to the point where you have a lot of pastors commit suicide. Because they're like, who do I go to to tell my stuff to? Who do I go to say, I'm not okay? I have faith. I believe in God. I have a great relationship with God. But right now, I'm not okay. Who do they go to say that without somebody saying, what? You're the pastor. What you mean? What you mean you're not okay? You have to be okay. Because if you're not okay, then we're not going to be okay. So I need you to be okay.
Well, and I think, and maybe this kind of can segue us into the next kind of question, but I think one of the things that I know for me, I've been learning in a Christian context through not only COVID, but even just the civil unrest in our country, the conversations around race and racism and all of that's happened in our country, witnessing police brutality and police violence on TV and riots, right? Like that wreaks havoc, on, for me, I know it has been wreaking havoc just on me internally. And I've been learning that, something culturally that we've lost in the Western church and the American church is lament.
Right.
Like to just sit. I mean, right now, actually, in my devotional, I've been intentionally trying to look at the Psalms and look at all the positive, joyful, kind of worshipful Psalms. But it's actually, there are fewer of those than there are Psalms of lament.
It's true.
Right.
And yet, like, it's so not a part of our culture as the church to, like you're saying, it should be the Christians. It should be the pastor who knows how to lament, who knows how to be honest with themselves and with their emotions. And so we need to get better.
Yeah, there's that tension of like imitate me as I imitate Christ, and then remembering Jesus wept in front of probably hundreds of thousands of people.
Right. Jesus was such a great mentor. Like you just look at his life and see, you know, how he moved and how he lived. And like even talk about self-care, you know, when he was on the boat, he was like,
Taking
I need
naps.
a nap. Why?
love
Because
that.
he knew that he was going to go on the other side and have to pour out.
That-
People
yeah.
were going to pull on him. People were going to, and of course, everybody who followed Jesus was not following Jesus because he was Jesus. Some people wanted to be nosy. Some people wanted the bread.
The spectacle, right? Yeah.
But Jesus was Jesus no matter what, right? He was who he was, and he did not apologize for it. And a lot of times he let us know who he was.
Another one of my favorite examples is Elijah in the Old Testament, where he's burned out after all the conflict with the prophets of Baal.
Right.
God's like, hey, eat this snack and take a nap.
Go to sleep.
Okay.
Go to sleep.
You know, like self-care is
Go to sleep
important,
whenever.
and it's right there. Like
Absolutely.
so-
And you know, even if you think about the Bible, you think about Genesis, right? With the fall. Like what I tell pastors too is that everything was affected with the fall. Everything. So physical health, mental health, everything was affected. And even if you look throughout the Bible, David was depressed. Saul was
Right.
Look, David did music therapy for Saul.
Right.
Sure did.
That's awesome.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Jeremiah cursed the day he was born.
Right.
Jonah wanted to die. Elijah wanted to die. Judas committed suicide.
Yeah.
Like this is
It's in there.
and it's in there.
Yeah.
And the first negative that came into after the fall, shame. There was no shame. Then fear. Then jealousy. Then murder. Then all these things started coming in after the fall. Everything was perfect before then.
Right.
That's why when I get to heven, I need to speak to Eve.
Right.
Get out of conversation. Wow.
Listen, but you know, you bring up a good point though, because I think what happens is we hear these Bible stories, and I know we're getting a little sidetracked, but I think it's going to be important for Christians to hear this. Like we hear these stories though about David, about Elijah, or you know, Jonah. We hear these stories, and we are so used to these stories being used as like those aspects of their stories being used to. It's kind of like that was the before. But then a sermon always ends with the after. You know what I mean? Like, but then, you know, David slayed Goliath, you know, but then, you know, Elijah, you know, heard God at the mountaintop or whatever. And I think we move so quickly past those points of depression that we don't allow people to sit in that. I think it's interesting that you brought up Elijah, because in church, I think most often we talk about, you know, there are certain characters and parts of the Bible we talk about, but we don't talk a lot about the prophets, and we don't talk a lot about the Psalms, especially the laments. And that's because I think they're messy, and they're a little open-ended, and it doesn't always wrap up real nice and neat. And so,
And as people, we want to be comfortable. We want to be comfortable. We do not like being uncomfortable. And part of the brain's function is to keep us comfortable. You know, and so like, you know, if you ever lay in the bed, you be like, okay, I'm going to the gym tomorrow. I am going to the gym tomorrow. And you wake up in the morning, it's raining, and you start thinking, oh man, because the brain, a part of the brain's job is to assess for threat. And if we're uncomfortable, that's a threat. And so then the brain will give you reason not to go to the gym. Oh, you went yesterday. Oh, you ate good yesterday. You can go tomorrow.
Wow.
You like, oh, okay, brain, thanks for confirming.
right.
When we are uncomfortable, we fall into the confirmation bias where we look for reasons that support our decisions.
Yeah.
Even though we know it's wrong.
Yeah. That's good.
So I got two questions.
Yeah.
Hopefully it goes with where we're going.
Yeah.
Talking about self-care. Kimtrese, can you give us some tools, some things that we can do for self-care, especially regarding the times that we're living in, where you have social unrest, racial injustice, and on top of that, a global pandemic? What things can we do for self-care that will not permanently take us out of the things that are happening in the world? So for example, what I'm
really
thinking
good.
about is when you watch the news, when you see a certain thing happening over and over and over again, you take in that trauma. And I'm pretty sure you got the professional term for it, but I'm just a musician. So, but when you watch it over and over again, or watch the same thing over and over again, it starts to create a certain just opinion or narrative within you, and it causes you more harm than good by keep watching it and taking it in. So that's one thing. What can we do for self-care things, but still maintain our sense of being present in the current world? And what are some things that people who have high action, that's probably not the word, but high action, intense professions that they can do to self-care so that they aren't like people who are dealing with trauma a lot, those working in healthcare, those teachers, those pastors, those police officers, people who are in those high pressure situations all the time. What things can they do? Can we do? Because we're probably in all of that. What can we do to maintain some self-care things until while we're going to therapy? Because all is about to start going to therapy.
We're converted.
Right.
So I think for the first question, I think you have to be self-aware. You have to understand what you need. We live in a world where we know more about other people than we know about ourselves. Yeah. And so we have to learn to spend time with ourselves and really understand who we are and understand that we're all different and we're all complex, right? And this is why it's not good to compare yourself to other people, because you don't know what other people are going through, right? And so that's the first thing, knowing who you are in this world and really truly understanding in that and knowing what you need, because what I need may be different from what you need or what you need. And so that's the first thing, is like knowing who you are and paying attention to what you need. Also, when it comes to that's what it's called, secondary trauma.
That's what it is. I knew what it was when I was like, I can't think of the term. I knew exactly what, secondary trauma.
Because of secondary trauma, the news is not, it's definitely going to increase that. You have to watch your mental diet, what you're taking in, what you're reading, what you're watching, who you have around you and what they're talking about. Right. So sometimes when people are around me and they talk about certain things, I'm like, nope, don't want to hear that. I already hear this all day. I don't want to hear that. Right. So be careful what you allow. I'll call it the hula hoop. Right. Don't come in my hula hoop. And so of course we need to stay up on current events and things, but maybe reading some credible sources like the Atlantic. They have some really good articles. Love the Atlantic. And so
you need a minute though. You really are a reader. Because Atlantic is like that long hour. Reading one article. But anyway.
So reading things that are going to give you the truth. Yeah. But with the news is entertainment. The news is propaganda. Yeah. Propaganda is how Hitler got so big and was able to do what he did because of the propaganda. When the brain, right, you have a part in your brain called the basal ganglia right here. And it's where we develop our habits, right? And so all we have to do here is just keep repeating. And even though we may logically know it's wrong, we're going to go with it because it feels right. Wow. Because we're feelers. Right? We're emotional beings. And so even though we know a decision is wrong, I may know eating that cake is wrong, but I want it. Right. I want it. And it's good. Yeah. It's going to make me feel good. So I'm going to eat it knowing I shouldn't. Yeah. And so making sure that you are, if you're going to watch the news, cut it down. Don't watch it all day. Don't have it playing on every TV in the house, blasting, right? Because all you're doing is conditioning yourself to be afraid, to be fearful, increasing your anxiety, and decreasing your cortisol, which is your stress hormones, and decreasing your serotonin, and increasing your cortisol, right? And so staying away from those things. Now, when it comes to like the second question, with the high-powered jobs, here are some specific things. So specifically, one of the things I say is get outside in nature in the sun. That's extremely important. And when it comes to self-care, people think all these elaborate things. But when it comes to the body doesn't need much. It doesn't need the elaborate things. It needs small things. It needs sun. It needs rest. It needs connection. It needs like taking a bath is so good. Men be looking at me like, what? Taking a bath is more than getting clean. Taking a bath, it calms the nervous system. It regulates your body temperature. It causes you to sweat, which burns calories. Right? That's why when you get out of the tub, you're tired. Right. You sleepy.
I have no experience in this area. I gotta try this out.
Yes. I remember taking baths as a kid. I'll be so tired. Or if you get in the pool, right? You come out, you feel so drained and tired. Why? Because your nervous system has brought all of that cortisol down to a healthy base. Wow. And so now you're tired and you sleep. That's the best sleep you ever get.
Right.
And so taking a bath, getting out in nature, exercising, eating right, like those are the things that the body needs. Mindfulness, sitting in silence and being aware. We're not mindful at all. You can be in the shower and you think about the 50 things you got to do when you get out.
Right.
Instead of being in the shower, instead of realizing where I am and being thankful that there are people around the world who don't have access to showers.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling the warm water on your body, right? And not thinking about what you got to do when you get out. When you get out, that's when you think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But being in the moment, even when we're in the moment talking to each other. You see people talking to each other, one person on their phone. Oh, yep, I hear you. I got you. Oh, yep, go ahead. We're not mindful about the people that we sit with, right? And for the professionals, getting therapy. Going to therapy, carving time out for yourself. You're giving, you're pouring out. Your cup is empty. How do you have to fill it back up? And going to therapy helps you to work those things out. Wow. Hey, here's what I need. Do you have any ideas on, things I could do specifically? I have people doing mirror work. Every morning for 30 days, they stand in front of the mirror. They say one thing that they're grateful for. They say one thing that they forgive themselves for, and one thing that they don't need to apologize for. For 30 days, and it's amazing at what it does. And then affirmations and setting the intent of your day. I'm going to have a great day. No matter what happens, life is going to happen. I can't prepare for it. But regardless, my attitude is not going to reflect what's happening.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's good.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the first half of your question was so key about, what was it? Secondhand trauma.
Yes,
Secondhand trauma. Because, the reason we're doing one table, the reason we come here is like in life, you want to come to the table with people who have different experiences, different perspectives on life. Because, again, we've said it before, your perspective might not be wrong, but it is limited.
Right.
And so being in a multicultural church and doing life with people that don't look like me, realizing the way it hit other people this past year, all the police brutality, it hits other people different than it does me. Like, I never forget a call I had with a friend. He was like, dude, I hugged my wife tighter this morning and my kids longer because somebody who looked like me didn't make it home yesterday.
Yeah.
And like to hear that and recognize that and realize that that's been like, not just the past year, like living in America.
Somebody's life.
And just to recognize that, because in the church, right, we're called to weep with those who weep, but not everybody's been doing that over the past year.
Yeah.
It's been like, well, should you be weeping?
Yeah.
Like, is it really,
Right.
really traumatized? So just even that idea of secondhand trauma, because you're like, how's that traumatizing for you? Just to even hear there's a word for that, like that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about trauma, we have to realize, in our world, we call it the big T and the little T. But trauma is different for everybody. Trauma is simply an emotional wound, a deep distress and emotional wound. And you and I could be in a car accident. I could come out like, oh, that was crazy. And you come out like, oh, I ain't never driving again. Because it hit you differently. You experienced it differently. We all can walk in a room and see the same thing. And all of our stories will be different because we experience things differently. And so you may experience the car accident differently than I experienced it. And so when it comes to the racial injustice, that is something that has been major in my practice where people are just afraid. I know for me as being a Black woman, I have to have a conversation with my daughter. I have to tell her, if you get pulled over, here's what you need to do. That's heartbreaking to have that. And even if I'm driving and a police officer pull up behind me, he could just be driving behind me. My body begins to respond. I start feeling anxious.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
I start sweating. My chest start getting tight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just feel like I need to run. I need to get away. So I'll pull to another lane because I know the possibility of me making it not making it home is real. And that's scary.
Yeah. I just the whole concept, I remember, for me, it was Philando Castile and seeing that video and thinking like, that's so crazy that his daughter was in the backseat, that his girlfriend was sitting right next to him. Like, that he had a firearm that was legal, like all of these, it was broad daylight. Like, I mean, it hit, and to just watch the video, and I don't know, big T, little T, what, but I felt the trauma of that, right? And and there have been several times this past year where I'm like, I just want to call in Black today. You know what I mean? Because like, because there, to Juice's point, like, I think the news, COVID, there are certain things that like we all have in common that have affected us this year for sure. And but I don't know. I think that there is something too, and maybe you can speak to that, or is it a thing? Is collective secondary trauma a thing where maybe people of color or Black people are experiencing trauma at a higher level or a different rate than other people in America right now because of what's going on? Like,
I think we are. I think because this is something we've been dealing with for so long, and COVID is just, let's just tack that on.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's put the cherry on top.
Yeah.
You know, it's real. You know, it's something that we've been fighting. It's almost like going into war, right? And you're fighting this side, and then another war breaks out behind you, and you fighting over here, and you fighting over here, and you just all over the place, and you getting banged in the head because you're trying to fight this person, and you turn this way, you're getting banged in the head over here. I think it is great, though. You know, not everybody's mourning with us and weeping with us, but a lot of people are. A lot of people, are. I know. I have a lot of Caucasian clients, and they're like, "What can I do? What do I need to read?" What, and I tell people, read the Color Law. You know, I had this one client. She read it. She came back. She was like, I don't even need no session today. I just need to talk about this book.
Right.
You know, so there are a lot of people who are saying, no, that's wrong. And thank God for those people, because those people are the people who were very prevalent in the civil rights movement and prevalent, you know, in the Underground Railroad. There's certain things you just can't do without allies. Right. And so we've always had allies who marched with us, allies who died with us, allies who died for us. Yeah. And we have to respect that. We have to honor that. Yeah. You know, but then at the same time, in the church, we do expect, you know, our allies to be the people that are sitting next to us, because we do believe in the same God, don't we?
Right.
You know,
we are brothers and sisters.
We are brothers and sisters, right? And so if your brother is in pain, then I'm not saying that you should know exactly what it's like, but when it comes to pain, pain is universal. We've all experienced it. So maybe you don't understand the actual pain in the sense of race, but you do understand pain.
Yeah. And you should be able to have some empathy.
And you should be able to have some empathy. And empathy just means I feel what you feel.
Yeah.
I see you.
I love, and it goes back to what you were saying before about just the fact that, you know, what we really need is connection. We need to be able to have a space what the receptionist promised you that the doctor would do, somebody who would be there for you and listen to your situation. It's like, you know, we need that. And I think, you know, I'm so glad that you brought that up, that there are people out there doing that. Because I know for me, in the beginning of this whole unrest that's happened in our country, I remember looking around being like, I don't really know whose ear I have or who I can talk to. And so the trauma was a little bit more back then. But you're right. The more you can connect with people and the more we can avail ourselves to people in their situations and be a listening ear and empathize and not be like that one counselor who was like, well, you know, that's to be expected because you're this or you're that. The less we can be like that and the more we can be actual empathetic brothers and sisters, the better and the healthier we're all going to be. And
I think for us too, being able to connect with people who allow us to grieve how we grieve, you know, and just to be ourselves. And, you know, if we're hurting, to cry, well, however we do that, you know, however we grieve, right, to express that and not be like, okay, I know you're in pain, but let's just pray.
Oh, yeah.
No. No.
Somebody said to me,
I spoke at this women's conference, and this lady said to me, she said, well, you know, with the whole, when the whole George Floyd thing happened, she said, you know, what she said, I was somewhere. She said she was somewhere, and she said to a black woman, well, we just need to pray. She said the black lady went off on her. And she's like, I didn't understand why she went off on me.
Yeah.
I said, well, let me tell you, sis, I got you. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna hold you down. I said, when you say that to a black woman, here's what comes to mind. And I'm gonna tell you as a black woman what comes to mind. Slavery comes to mind. Well, we've always prayed. We prayed when we were in Africa. We prayed on the ship on the way over here. We prayed when we got to a foreign land. We prayed when we couldn't use our language, when we couldn't wear our hair the way we wanted to. We prayed when we had to eat the pig feet instead of eating the steak. We prayed when we had to breastfeed your kids and we couldn't breastfeed ours. We prayed when we were in the field 14 to 18 hours a day in 100-degree heat and had to make sure we piled up enough cotton or we were going to get beat. We've been praying. And not to say that prayer doesn't work, because it absolutely does, but action. But we have to take action. So when you say to me, let's just pray about it, I feel like you dismiss everything that my culture, my people have gone through. So yes, let's pray and.
Right, pray and.
And she was like, "Oh yeah, that's great. Got
it.
And, and everybody's protest looks different, right?
Yeah.
My protest is not. Some people are out there marching. Some people working with the governor. Some people are writing policies. Yeah. Everyone's protest looks good, different, right? Exactly. You know. And so even with some black people, I'm like, you can't get mad at this black person because they're not out.
Right.
Marching.
Exactly.
That's not their protest. Exactly. They feel like they could be more effective sitting with the governor and writing new laws or looking through the old laws and saying, this is not right. This needs to be removed or this needs to be corrected. That's their protest. You can't tell people how to protest.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Well, maybe one more question before we close out, just to tie it all together, because one thing that Chris brought up is about just high pressure jobs, and then the question about self-care. I think there was, Juice brought up an example recently in the news, the tennis player Naomi Osaka from Japan, right?
Yes, of partial Japanese descent.
Okay, all right. And so, I don't know if you know about that. I'm not a sports person, so like
you gonna get to know David.
Do you want to explain the situation?
Well, yeah, it was the French Open, and she didn't want to do the media sessions. And so they fined her $15,000 for not doing the media session. And then all the other tournaments kind of drew this hard line, like, yeah, you got to do these media sessions, or else. Or else we'll keep. Yeah. I'm just here so I won't get fined. Right. But she was like, no, I'm not going to do them. And her reasoning was for self-care. She had been struggling with depression. She'd been struggling with anxiety. And yeah, so the coverage was kind of back and forth. Like, should she have to do it? Is this a legit excuse?
Right.
And I remember reading the headline where it was like, this is the first time a tennis star has withdrawn from a major tournament without a major injury. And it just kind of highlighted to me again how we elevate like physical pain over mental pain or physical wellness versus mental wellness. Because like if one of y'all said earlier, like if you tear your ACL, you're not going to hey, just push through it, right? Just gut it out. If you wouldn't be like, oh, you got to go play tennis on this torn ACL. Right. But when it's depression, it's like, oh, no, you should just press through, gut it out, like be strong. So
that's really
but it ties into that idea of like self-care, like you said.
Yeah. So then how do we, I mean, I think for me that whole story is inspiring because it was a person drawing her own boundaries and saying, you know what, my mental health matters, and even if it doesn't matter to you, it matters to me. And I thought that story is empowering. There's a article in Time magazine called about her and that whole decision called "It's Okay Not to Be Okay." And so maybe just like for those of us out there in the world who have maybe high pressure jobs or who feel like we can't say no, right? Like I can imagine. I know Naomi Osaka is not the first professional athlete,
absolutely,
who
not
right, who needs to draw those lines for their own mental health, but she's the first one, at least that we're aware of, who has, and good for her, right? But there's many others who aren't. So those of us who feel like we can't say no, right? How do you suggest we start saying no? Where do we start? How do we take care of ourselves when we feel like maybe our kids or our spouses or our bosses or our churches or the expectations in the world won't allow us to do so?
Well, I think the first thing you have to realize is that you can say no. I think we live in a society that pressures us into this idea that we can't say no. We can say no to anything we want to say no to. I think we are afraid of the consequences. I don't think she was afraid of the consequences because I think what she realized is that I am replaceable. And I tell people this, like with their jobs, when they have high-powered jobs. I don't care how long you went to school. I don't care how much degrees you have, how much money you have. You are replaceable. You die today. Your job description may be posted before
the funeral.
Right. And so you can say no. And this is why it's important to understand you and understand what you need. And you have to put yourself first. And I know in the church we have to be humble. I got to put myself first because I could be humble and dead.
Yeah.
Right. And so with her, I commend her because what she realizes that she is a part of a world that expects her, that has all these high expectations of her and may look at her as weak.
Yeah.
Because of her mental health illness. And this is something that Sean and I were talking about when it came to Kevin Love, who deals with anxiety.
Right.
You know, he talked about how he played despite all the anxiety he was dealing with because of the pressures of other people. Wow. It's so funny how people will pressure us, but they won't allow us to pressure them. Right? I was listening to, I can't remember what I was listening to. I'm always listening to a reading song. But it was talking about, it's this book called Irresistible, and it's talking about addiction, how addiction works. And he was talking about how when Steve Jobs got on stage in 2010 and introduced the iPad, he stood up there for 90 minutes and talked about why you need the iPad in your life. But then he had a conversation with his kids and said, you dare not use an iPad.
Wow.
Right.
And people who create all of these tech games and Twitter and Facebook and all that, their kids are not allowed to use these things. Their kids are not allowed to have access to these things.
Wow.
And we'll give our kid an iPad and be like, go watch TV. Go do this, go do that, right? And that does have effect on our mental health because it gives us more access to societal expectations of us. We know more about what society expects from us more than we know what we expect from us, and sometimes more than we know what God expects from us, right? And so we have to realize, she realized that I can go and I can keep going on, but guess what? If I have a mental breakdown, they're gonna do another article in Time Magazine. Talk about how weak she was and why she just didn't quit and why she didn't look out for herself and why she didn't take care of herself and she was too weak because the people. What team did she have around her? You know, and it's like you can't win for losing, so you might as well win.
That's so good.
But I think even just to come full circle to the headline of it's okay to not be okay, like as a church, right? If we believe the gospel where Jesus died for messy people, Jesus died for sinners, we should believe, it is okay to not be okay. And you take that to the cross, and you can also take that to a therapist, right?
Absolutely.
You can
Absolutely.
do the work, put the work in, but Flowmaster, you can go ahead and take it.
No,
take it from here.
that's great. No, I think this has been awesome. I think there's so many good nuggets in this. This one probably I'm gonna have to watch again.
Right. Watch and
just,
listen over and over.
Yeah, to pull all the nuggets. I feel like I've been in counseling today.
I mean, right.
This was our little primer.
No, go.
Go for real.
No, I'm not.
Go for real.
I'm not excusing myself. I'm just saying, it's a little half step. But we hope you watching that you felt inspired. If you have questions, as always, you can engage with us. If you're watching on YouTube, talk to us in the comments. We always encourage you to to share, but this might be especially important to share for people who in your life who either need counseling, who maybe have one of the perspectives that we had about counseling or experiences that you've heard someone say, I had a bad experience. This might be a really good conversation for them to hear, and so share, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and we're gonna leave some stuff in the show notes and stuff.
I was gonna say, show Kimtrese some love, and just real quick before we close, you want to just say where people can find you in case women, and if they want counseling or therapy, how can they find you?
So my website is hummingbirdforwomen.com. You can call the office 525-8014. Or I'm on Facebook. I'm on
Kimtrese Slaughter, right?
Kimtrese Slaughter.
That's your real last name.
I always use my name. And we have an office right up the street from here, actually. So reach out. I mean, we have about 6 therapists right now. So we moving.
Y'all moving.
We working.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, Kimtrese, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
To the table.
First ever guest. Congratulations. We'll get you a t-shirt.
Or whatever,
I'm special or whatever.
But thank you, Kimtrese. Y'all, thank you for being at the table. Thank y'all for being at the table. And
thank y'all for coming, man.
We'll see you next time.
Next time at the table.
Peace.